got for tonight, John Inverdale, and I'll hand over to Marcus, who will do the introduction. Marcus.
Good evening, all. Great to see you online again tonight. It's been a long time since we've all been, should we say, around the table. It's different times. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce John Inverdale tonight. John did an event for me in 2015, and it's fair to say he captured the audience. And John's been capturing the audience for many, many years in different sports. And we all know him as definitely a voice and a face of rugby for us, for those who follow rugby, but of football, of Wimbledon, of the Olympics, for both the BBC and ITV. I believe his career started off in Lincoln as an editor, and he did a lot of his groundwork in university in Cardiff, and also in Southampton, from my sources tell me. But most importantly, the one thing about John, he gives it as it's supposed to be. He's not shy of controversy, as we know. But most importantly, he's a gentleman, and that's the one thing I've always liked about John. Now, John's going to give us some of his stories tonight, and he's also going to answer your questions. And I'm going to really kick off and introduce John. But John, there's one sport that I believe that you have an affinity to also, and you have obviously done the Grand National. But is it true? You've got a bit of a racehorse history behind you, especially that picture that's on your wall.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you've mentioned that. Well, I'll just say first of all, hello to everybody, wherever you may be. I can see on the chat line the geographic spread we've got. Brigg and Scunthorpe, sort of my alma mater up that part of the world. It's it's one of those things. I just say about Lincolnshire, by the way. It did starting in Lincoln. My very first day working at radio on the Lincolnshire Echo newspaper was I got sent to Mablethorpe, and it was a long old day with a photographer, and he said to me, it's the first, I'd never been to Lincolnshire in my life before, and he said to me, what do you think about Lincolnshire? And I said, well, it's a bit bloody flat, isn't it? He said, yeah, he said, but there's an awful lot of sky. And in that one moment, he changed my life. And I've become a real nerd about clouds ever since then. And I used to love heading off down to the Wash, down to Boston and Holbeach, and heading out to Crowland and places, right down into the nether regions where people say, why would you ever go there? I say, God, because the sky is just amazing. So that's just going off at a tangent. Anyway, yeah, that picture, where's my hand going? No, that's the wrong way. I'm struggling with the mirror. Oh, here we are, there we are. So if you can see up there, there's a painting I had done. I mean, I presented Cheltenham on the radio for 30 odd years. And I was very ill when I was young, in the teenage years. And in those days, looking around the populace who are on this call, they may remember that there wasn't anything on, well, telly didn't start till tea time, did it? Unless there was racing on. And I had a lot of weeks, a lot of months when I was at home and doing work from home, so that's almost like a precursor for what everyone's been doing over this year. And it was an absolute joy when there was racing on the television, because it was something else. And I suddenly got into it. My parents had no interest in it whatsoever. And I just suddenly loved it. Anyway, so it's become an absolute passion of mine through over the years. And actually, I was really, I was made a director of Cheltenham Racecourse on Tuesday of this week, which I'm so proud of and really excited about and whatnot, because it's been one of my favorite places in the world since I was a kid. And I actually, this is going off at a tangent, I will come back to that picture in a second. But actually the first year I went to Cheltenham for the festival, I went to the Gold Cup in '73 from school in Bristol. And I decided to knock off at break time at sort of like 10 to 11, run down to Bristol Temple Mead Station, get on the train and go to Cheltenham. And this tells you how long ago it was. The trains had carriages. So there was it was like something from a Poirot movie, So there was the corridor, and then you open the door and there was the carriage. Anyway, I got in, I sat down thinking, Christ, I've got away with it. I'm away. I told people I'd had a cold and I was going home, And there was a guy in the carriage who was hiding behind the Sporting Life, which no longer exists. But anyway, he was hiding behind the Sporting Life, which was a broadsheet newspaper, so you couldn't really see him. And he got the newspaper, and he just kind of went like that, and then he went, oh, and it was my English teacher at school, who also was knocking off to go to Cheltenham, and he just said to me, I won't tell if you won't tell. He went back to the Sporting Life, and we didn't speak about it ever again for the next 3 years that I was at school. He never mentioned it. I never mentioned it, but we sort of had that shared experience. Anyway, that is a painting of a horse called Amor Prop. And over the years, I've never owned a whole horse. I've owned bits, you know. And there's 6 of us, and there were 6 of us in a syndicate. And one day, and this story needs no embellishment. It's absolutely good because it just makes you weep. Is that 6 of us in this syndicate, which we've still got a syndicate. We still operate as a syndicate now. And our trainer rang us all, probably emailed us, I can't remember anyway, in 2005, I think it was. Said, I've got you a horse for next year. And, you know, next question, how much? Said 1,500 quid. What, each? No, in total. So don't be stupid. There's no such thing as a horse. There's no the horse down in the field at the back here does not. You can't have anyway.
I've got another 41.
So he said, seriously, you're talking about 250 quid each. He said 250 quid each as a payment, down payment. Okay. Anyway, somebody's got their or not muted, by the way, so I can hear a lot of off noise. Anyway, but just to say, so this is absolutely true. So this, as a 2-year-old, this horse, I went to its first race, thinking, you know, 250 quid. If it gets to the end of the race, it will be a miracle. Anyway, it won, and it went on winning, and it couldn't stop winning. And to this day, it still holds the course record for 5 furlongs at Bath, Warwick, and Chepstow. We won a big race at Newmarket, amazingly. I mean, just that was one of the most extraordinary sporting days of my life. Complete outsider. Went to Newmarket thinking, well, you know, we really are here to make up the numbers. We won by 8 lengths going away, and I thought, this is ridiculous. And we found ourselves second favourite for the King Stand Stakes at Royal Ascot. Now, if you don't have to be a racing person, everyone knows what Royal Ascot is, and the King Stand Stakes is like it's the 5 furlong sprint championship, so it's the shortest possible distance, and the fastest horses in Europe and from elsewhere taking part. And we were second favourite for this race. And I took my kids were 13 and 11. I took them out of school for the day because I said, you're never going to have a day like this ever again. It's, you know, it's ridiculous. I mean, I have to say that my feeling about sport is that it is always going to end in disappointment. It always ends in tears. You know, there are very few sporting stories that have a happy ending. And the fact that I'm telling you this story now, you know that it hasn't got a happy ending. But anyway, but I took the kids out, and the Queen had a runner in the race. Sheikh Mohammed had, you know, various horses, blah, 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 blah. And as I walked into Royal Ascot that day, Willie Carson, the former champion jockey, came over to me and said, John, he didn't say if, he said, when your horse wins today, he said, it's going to be worth millions. I said, Willie, just don't even say it. You know, it's just ridiculous, utterly ridiculous. So we're in the parade ring. And I'm sorry if there are people here who aren't racing people, because it's quite hard to explain, but you will have seen the parade ring, which is, I'll leave my hands on the screen. It's a parade, normally a round ring where the horses parade and go round and round before the races. You'll have seen that on television, even if you've got no interest in racing and you've kind of just immediately hit the remote and gone somewhere else. Anyway, if the parade ring is kind of here, there's something called the pre-parade ring that's over here. And that's where the horses go round and round and round and round before they go round and round and round in front of the public. And they're going round and round for the owners and the connections and people who are involved with the horse. So the 6 of us are there with our trainer, and we're just going, man, this is just bonkers. This really is bonkers. You know, we're all there in our top hat and tails as well, obviously. can you possibly conceive of this with this nag? Anyway, at that moment, our trainer's mobile phone goes. This is 25 minutes before the race. And he's going, yeah. I'll ask them now because they're all here. And it was a businessman in Hong Kong offering us there and then £750,000 for the horse to run in his name in the King's Stand Stakes. So 25 minutes later. So even I could do the maths there, that was 140, 30 grand each or whatever else. And I've always been a great believer in a bird in the hand and all that sort of stuff. So our trainer's on the phone to this guy in Hong Kong. And he says, well, listen, so he tells us what the situation is. And he says, right, quick decision. I need a decision here and now. So 5 of them are lured by stardust and thinking that stories have happy endings when we know they never have happy endings. They never have happy endings. So they are lured by this. And me, ever the pragmatist and the glass half full person, or half empty probably actually, I'd say, no, listen, take it, just bloody take it for God's sake, you know. Anyway, I was outvoted 5-1. So, hey, you know, these decisions you make that determine the course of your life. We get in the parade ring, it's all that sort of stuff. Queen, Sheikh Mohammed, blah, you know, our nag, second favourite. You're still dreaming with a small d. Comes out the stalls, damages a tendon, staggers home 13th of 16, I think it was, never wins again. The end. Good night. And half an hour earlier, we could have had 150 grand each. I mean, I can't believe we're even still talking to each other, you know. But anyway, but that's the problem with sport, isn't it? It still tells you that we still think there's always that possibility that it might be tomorrow, it might be then, and most of the time it isn't.
And what do you say, John, of your commentary over the years? And I've got some questions here, but I'm going to frame.
Can I just say, by the way, sorry, I've seen High from the Beericks of the North yeah. Berwick. Can I just say, I've actually, it's just one of my favourite parts of the world. Northumberland, leading up to, you know, that coastal line is just fantastic. So hello, wherever you are, actually in that area, lovely to hear from you. Sorry, go on, Mark.
No. I'm sure the guys absolutely love the hand up there. What I was going to say with your sporting, commentary and what you've done over the years, and you've just mentioned that sport always doesn't end in the way that people wanted the fairy tale. What's the top couple of moments that you've witnessed that you were there and you say, you know what, I will always remember. You write books. This will go in the book of memories of events, and I was there as a commentator, as a witness, in your lifetime so far.
I mean, number one on that list will forever be the Rugby World Cup final in Johannesburg in '95, the Mandela and Pienaar moment. That was amazing. To be in the press box there, broadcasting, and just looking around me at, you know, the industry that I've made, you know, spent my life in, is a pretty cynical, gnarled industry where people are always looking. There is a slight negativity about it. There's always, we're looking to knock things and what have you. To see an unbelievable sense of positivity and joy, unbridled joy, enveloping the faces of all the people who were in that press box that day was extraordinary and unforgettable, absolutely unforgettable for so many reasons. I suppose that, you know, I would probably say Super Saturday at the London Olympics was something pretty special. Murray winning Wimbledon. I mean, tennis has been, my books behind me, which kind of extend a bit further on, but there's a lot of rugby books there from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, which were my dad's books. Which when he died, you know, I've kept every single one of them. So I've got you know, rugby and tennis library that's pretty extensive. But having watched, you know, I went to Wimbledon for the first time in 1970. And have been every year since. And all those years, you know, joking about, hey, we got a British man in the third round, hurrah! You know, the idea, and thinking that was the ultimate that it was ever going to be. When Murray won, that was it was a really, really special moment. And from a racing point of view, Desert Orchid winning the Gold Cup is my favourite ever race ever. And on that subject, actually, I would just, this is a stream of consciousness, so bear with me. The moment you get bored, please switch off. But people always talk about commentators. People will always talk about commentators because people have their favourite commentators, people that annoy them, people that just drive them around the bend, whoever that might be. But there's always a thing in commentary that when something exciting happens, your voice has to do this, oh, what a goal, or whatever it might be. And one of the greatest commentators I ever had the privilege of working with, he was a very individual man, very former army officer, and he carried that with him into the commentary box where he was the man in charge and woe betide anybody who countermanded his orders. But a guy called Peter Bromley, who was the racing commentator on BBC Radio for, I'm guessing 43, 44 years, had the most amazing voice. He and Peter O'Sullivan on television sort of ran parallel through their careers. And Peter Bromley's commentary on Desert Orchid winning the Gold Cup in 1989, for most people on this call are of an age that they will remember. Very few, if you have no interest in horse racing, certain horses you get interested in, Red Rum. Desert Orchid was one of those horses because he was a grey and all that sort of stuff. And there was, in the build-up to the Cheltenham Gold Cup that year in 1989, there was a huge thing about, because this is always one of these ridiculous things about horses for courses. People always say horses for courses. What does that mean? It means actually that some horses like some courses and don't like others. Some horses genuinely, and this is, if you have no interest in horse racing, but this is an absolute truism, some horses like running that way around and hate running that way around, and vice versa. Desert Orchid loved going that way around, so going clockwise, hated going anti-clockwise, so never ran one at Cheltenham. But Cheltenham is an anti-clockwise course. So if you want to, it's no good saying, can we have the Cheltenham Gold Cup somewhere else, please, where it goes that way around, because it doesn't work like that. So if you're going to win it, you've got to win it going that way. So everyone was saying, well, it was pouring with rain. It was a horrible day. And the front page of the papers were all about, could Desert Orchid win the Gold Cup, because it was that kind of a hype thing. And get to the end of the story, get to the comment, it was an unbelievably close race. Him and a horse called Yahoo, they were literally like that all the way. And Desert Orchid won. And the cliched, obvious commentary is to go, Desert! And go up there, higher, higher. Peter Bromley's commentary, he went, Desert Orchid. The relief, it was like a nation breathed a sigh of relief that he'd managed to win against all the odds by the narrowest of margins. And instead of doing that, he went like that. Masterful, absolutely brilliant. And one of the greatest bits of commentary I've ever heard, because just by the intonation and the tone, he actually encapsulated all that everybody who was watching and was listening was thinking. Just fantastic.
Fantastic. Well, let me read this one to you, and it's from a fantastic rugby club, Stortford, Bishop Stortford's rugby club, and I know a couple of guys down there very well. Hi, John. I'm a past chairman of Bishop Stortford's rugby club in National League One. Great to see the announcement a couple of days ago about the return of community rugby, and I'm with you on this one. But does the change in rules relating to in particular scrums and mauls, herald a permanent change in the future? What's your opinion?
Well, given some of the entertainment value of the internationals recently, part of me says I hope so. But no, I don't think it does. I think it's not. It's a practical thing to enable under DCMS legislation, if you like. It's just a practical thing to enable clubs to get back operating. So no, it doesn't. But it'll be interesting to watch sports or the game without scrums, because certainly in the last 3 or 4 weeks they've been indescribably tedious, as have many other aspects of the game. But in defense, and some of you may say dismiss this, but I do think it's just been such an unreal environment in terms of no crowds, no build-up, no sense of anticipation, just an unreal world in which these games are having to take place. And all the players are living in COVID-secure environments where they're barely seeing anybody else. I hope that when the crowds come back, we will see things that actually, we might see more human error, and human error leads to more excitement. Because it's such a clinical vacuum kind of environment they're playing in at the moment, it's almost taken, it's made it sterile, which has made it not much of a spectacle. And I do hope that changes, you know, when, inverted commas, normality returns.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And kind of leading off some of the earlier questions, and this is from Martin at Whitney 41 Club. And he asked about the most impressive sports person you have met and why. And I'd ask you, what is it about that person that's kind of stuck in your mind over the years as well?
It's like one of those things you always see in questionnaires in newspapers about, you know, who are the 4 people you'd invite for your dinner guests and all that sort of stuff. One of the 4 immediately off the top of my head, I would say would be John McEnroe, because he wouldn't talk about tennis. He'd say, "Oh, you know, we can do the tennis, and then we'll talk other things." You know, if he would have been a lawyer had he not been a tennis player, or a politician. He's an art buff. He's a wine buff. He's a music buff. Whatever he has a brain that is so big, and he can talk so intelligently and so entertainingly about so many subjects. He is a truly extraordinary guy, and every second you spend in John's company, he's also very wicked and very witty. So he must be one of the great dinner party guests of all time. And it's like, I tell you who else I'd have actually, who else I would say, but it's interesting. John McEnroe is 50 times more interesting about every subject other than tennis, and that's the interesting thing about often people, but maybe that's true of politicians who are maybe infinitely more interesting when they're not talking about politics. But I tell you, somebody else who I'd have at my dinner party would be Alex Ferguson, who would refuse categorically to talk about football because he just does. But he's a fascinating man to talk about, his upbringing in Scotland, politics, just life, attitude to man management. He might allude to football on occasions about how he's dealt with people and players over the years, but his approach to encouraging people, berating people, how you actually deal with human interaction, he's a fascinating man. During the 1998 Football World Cup, I actually found myself, it's a long story that I will make into 10 seconds, only because he was Johnny No Mates for the ITV football team, because everybody else had gone to bed early. I was the Johnny No Mates for the BBC radio team, and we found ourselves in a bar at midnight with a bottle of wine, and he said, "Shall I get another one?" And I said, "Yeah, go on then." And we were still there at 5 a.m. drinking red wine. We had 5 hours together, just the two of us. I don't think I spoke for more than a minute, and I let him just talk, but it was just riveting. And I can remember so much of that conversation now. And a lot of it was about how you deal with people who are awkward to deal with, people who are malevolent, people who are trying to undermine your authority, people who need help and all that sort of stuff and need encouragement. It was a masterclass in human relations, if you like, that I've never forgotten. It stunned everybody into complete silence then. Hello. Anybody still there? Marcus, you still there? You muted yourself.
Okay, yeah, it seems to be
I think Marcus has lost the link.
All right, okay, well, there are questions here, so I'll run through them all very quickly. Right, John Gardner, Farrell or Ford? I think I'd always pick Ford at fly half because something more interesting might happen than if Farrell was there. Is there a particular, from Richard Bamford, is there a particular sporting event you have not attended and deeply regret? Whoa. The thing, could I have gone and didn't go? I don't know, I've never been to I've never done the Tour de France, and I'd love to have seen it for all the problems and all that sort of thing. I think a lot of red wine could have been drunk there. What did you think of the late Bill McLaren? I was very lucky enough to present the last, Wales-Scotland was his last match in 2002, which I presented, and it was great to have him, on the podium after that to talk about his career and to do a documentary with him before he retired as well. And interestingly, I got sent a copy of the Scotsman newspaper this week, and they're going to have a museum in Bill's memory at Hawick Rugby Club, which I think is great. From Juliet Gilbert. Short and long-term financial impact of COVID. He's a Watford fan. I think what is the single most interesting, I really do think the single most interesting things from a sporting perspective of all that's going on at the moment is, are the haves really prepared to help the have-nots? Mm. You know, what really are the board at Manchester City? What were they thinking pre-COVID? What were they thinking at Man City and at Man United when they allowed Berry to go down the Swanee? The answer is they weren't thinking of anything other than themselves. And that, I thought, was a terrible indictment of some people at the helm of football. So that's how I'd answer that. Who would make my starting 15 on the Lions tour in the summer? 15 people. I'd start with the one person. Who was the one person I would absolutely have in that team? It would probably be Stuart Hogg. I just want to see somebody who, when the ball's kicked, something might happen. And he does that to me. He excites me. Sheikh Mohammed from Howard Henshaw. I arranged the purchase of his first stables in 1976 when I was the general manager of Standard Chartered Bank in Dubai. What does he think of Sheikh Mohammed's current problems in the High Court? Well, you know, cherchez la femme. John, at Roland Garros, the players didn't waste much time toweling down. Yes, please can that be normal? Forevermore, let us ban towels from tennis. If you're sweating, it's tough bananas. I'll tell you my most awkward interview story in just a sec. Hockey got rid of offside years ago, and it's made no negative difference. Should football do the same? I don't think so, for a whole load of reasons. Both my daughters played hockey at a good level, and I've probably watched more hockey than any other sport in the world in my whole life. And I would actually say that hockey has many issues which not having an offside law didn't really impact on. Which one rule would you change to promote evasion, not collusion, in rugby union? The first rule I would change in rugby union is that you can only get 30 seconds for a kick at goal. If 82,000 people go to Twickenham and you asked every single one of them, what are you looking forward to most today? None of them would say Owen Farrell going through that kicking regime before he kicks the ball. None of them would say that. And yet it takes 90 seconds every time he says it's just, and Dan Biggers is bad, etc. Please, 30 seconds. If Rafael Nadal can suddenly change his service routine, because otherwise he's going to get docked a point in tennis, anybody can change their routine in preparation for something, whether it's Farrell, Bigger, whoever. 30 seconds. And you have a shot clock on the stand, and the moment it hits 30, a hooter goes. If you haven't kicked it, tough. You've missed the chance of 2 or 3 points. Easily done, instantly makes the game better. Why not change penalty offences to free kicks, not penalty? Yeah, I'd agree with that totally. Kevin Chard, who is the greatest coach of any sport and why? Well, I mentioned Alex Ferguson, perhaps, maybe that was the answer. We hear so much about sportsmen who've developed dementia, T. Cook. There are also sports commentators who went on past their best, such as Paul Dickinson, who is a very sad case. What can the sports industry do to help out people who suffer in this way? I do think things are changing, genuinely. I think there's much more compassion and understanding across the sporting spectrum than there ever has been before. Do you think the amount of money involved in sport has taken a lot of fair play and sportsmanship out the club? From Nick in Bexhill. Yes. What are my views on the style of rugby played by Exeter Chiefs? From John Reed and Liscard. Well, it's not going to bring the crowds back, is it? That's all I would say there. I'm just going to go back to the question actually about the interview that was one of the hardest, or not the hardest, just one of those moments that I have told this story many times before, but I went to interview. This sounds ridiculously sort of pompous, but I went to Monte Carlo to interview Venus Williams after she'd won Wimbledon for the first time. And I was very, very nervous because she had a reputation as being quite fearsome at that point. She's mellowed a lot over the years. And I went out, I flew out to Nice with a film crew. And the day before the interview, her people said she wouldn't talk about her family, her sister, anything that was other than events on a tennis court. And it's a half-hour interview. And I'm thinking this is going to be a very, very long interview because how many times can you ask somebody about their topspin forehand, you know? Anyway, so I'm a bit apprehensive. And on the flight over, I pick up BA High Life magazine. And I'm flicking through it, get to the back, 20 questions for Venus Williams. Hallelujah. Because it's all the usual stuff about favorite movie and favorite this and that. But the last 2 questions, you know, I can remember it so vividly. What's the best thing about being an international sports star? Traveling the world and seeing amazing places. What's the worst thing about being an international sporting superstar? Traveling the world and being away from my friends and family, but especially my beloved dog, Pete, brackets, named after Sampras. And I think this is, thank you, this is an absolute manna from heaven, because what I'm going to do now is that Venus and I, we're going to bond over dogs. Any of you on this call, if you're a dog person, you know that you only have to talk about dogs to another dog person and everybody immediately, you've immediately got something that is just that intangible thing, dogness. And so I thought we're going to start talking about dogs. And then I'm going to say, does your sister like dogs? Did you have dogs when you were growing up? And suddenly she will open up and give this amazing interview that people will look back in years to come and say, that was the most revealing interview that Venus Williams ever gave. Anyway, fast forward to the moment, we're on the roof of the Café de Paris in Monte Carlo. Helen Rollason was presenting the program, sadly no longer with us, but just a fantastic broadcaster and just a wonderful person as well, who died of cancer nearly 20 years ago now, Helen, and there's an award in her name which is given at the Sports Review of the Year every year. Anyway, and I'm there, and she throws to me, and I say, well, here we are on the roof of the Café de Paris, and blah, 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 and a lovely blue sky, and here we have the reigning Wimbledon ladies singles champion, Venus Williams, and Venus, it's great to have you here. I sit down next door to her, say, well, here we are in Monte Carlo, and you're off to Roland Garros next week for the French Open, then it's Edgbaston and wherever else, Eastbourne, and then you're obviously at Wimbledon. So, you know, you're away from home for an awful long time, which is great on one hand, but on the other hand, you know, it means you're away from your family and your friends, and in your case, obviously, you know, your beloved dog, Pete. And she just looked at me with icy eyes and said, Pete's dead. He got run over. Now, that is a very difficult situation in which to recover, or from which to recover. And I palpably failed to recover from it for the next 29 minutes. And that's absolutely true. Other questions here. My golf clubs look very clean. When did you last get out? Well, not for the last month, but I'm actually playing 9 holes tomorrow in the afternoon. So fingers crossed on that. I see you have golf clubs behind you. There are a lot of golfers in the audience. Are you a good golfer? What is your handicap? What's your favorite course? Ever wanted to commentate on a golf major? Well, thank you, Peter McBride, for obviously never having switched on your radio, because I actually did it for 25 years on the radio and did 30 years of Ryder Cups. So, but anyway, but that doesn't matter. It's absolutely fine. My favorite course is Turnberry. It's just the most amazing place. I just love it. Put Donald Trump to one side, just go there and play. I just absolutely adore it. Although I would say the other course that I would put up there is, I love links courses so much more than, you know, Heathland courses. Royal Dornoch up in North Scotland, fantastic. And one of the other courses that I absolutely love that isn't quite so well known is Burnham and Barrow down on the Somerset coast. That's just a glorious place to play. What do I think about Tyson, from Andrew to everybody? What do you think about Tyson Fury wanting to be taken off the spotty shortlist? I saw that. I don't really understand. You know, there are people out there who have points to make, and he said he knows what his representation is from his people. I mean, I suppose the thing is, he knows he's not going to win it. You know, Lewis Hamilton's got to win it, I would suspect, and Holly Doyle, I would think, would be second, the jockey. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, the answer is, I don't know how many people are on this call. I don't know if I can see it somewhere, but anyway, however many it is. But what do any of us think about Tyson Fury? How can we ever form some sort of coherent thought about Tyson Fury? I don't know. I don't want to get in a fight with him. I know that. So I'm not going to argue with him, but I don't really know what his agenda is. Do you know what I mean? So the answer to that, I don't know. I think
John,
that's
one question for you.
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Just on sport, and are there any sports that you would have loved to have commentated on that you haven't?
Well, I mentioned the Tour de France only because I just love. I always think the great events, the great sporting events, are the ones that aren't just about the sport. Why are Six Nations weekends so great? Because it's not just about the game; it's everything that goes with it. Wimbledon's the same, Cheltenham's the same. You know, the golf majors are the same. I think the Tour de France has that. I think I'm probably very lucky to say that. No, I mean, I've never been to the Super Bowl, which I'd quite like to go to, just to probably say I didn't like it very much. I mean, American football's fine, but it just, it's just not. It'd be a much better game if it was half as long, and all that sort of stuff. I really like baseball. I've never commentated on baseball for obvious reasons, but I do like baseball a lot. So, but it's a very short list. So I'm ridiculously lucky to really have to think about that.
I think I have to say, and certainly from being a Welshman and just on the rugby front, I absolutely agree with you that the Six Nations is, more than just about the game. It's the build-up. It's everything that comes around that. And one of the questions that have been texted to me is, what's your thoughts on the development of the Six Nations over the next few years, and with other countries being touted? Do you think it should change, develop, etc.?
Yeah, I do think. I mean, I wish this had happened 20 years ago. I mean, Italy came in 10 years too late. Georgia obviously are knocking at the door. I think the key thing is there should be a Six Nations too. Personally, I think with Spain, who are a very good 7-a-side team, not quite so good 15s, but you can have Spain in there, Russia. It's really, I think it's be very important. I just wish. The interesting thing is the chief executive of World Rugby resigned yesterday. So there's a vacancy there. I would love somebody to go into World Rugby with a real vision and a real desire to broaden the game and make the haves give to the have-nots money that they could develop the game. Because I've always felt how fantastic it would be if England were playing Russia at Twickenham and you were going to Twickenham going, God, tell you what, this is going to be a bloody hard game. This could go either way. How much better a product is that than having the same old? That's why it was great that Argentina beat the All Blacks a couple of weeks ago. I think that's a really important thing for the growth of the sport. So I would love that to happen.
And I'm conscious of obviously your time this evening, but a couple more questions. I can see a few popping up in there about rugby specifically. There's a couple coming up there. Do you think England will ever beat New Zealand at rugby? Hey, what a question.
Ian McWilliam, I'm guessing you're Scottish, Ian. Is this a kind of venomous dig at England or something? I don't know. I think the aura of invincibility of the All Blacks has definitely diminished in the last month or so. Although having said that, I honestly think I don't think you'd probably got a bookmaker that would have taken it. But all the money that Rishi Sunak has had to shell out on the furlough scheme, you could have made back last week on the All Blacks beating Argentina, even though the odds were 8-1 on before kickoff, because there was absolutely no way that the Argentinians were going to play 3 weeks in a row like that. And there was absolutely no way that the All Blacks were going to allow themselves to be beaten twice in 3 weeks by the Argentinians. They were 8-1 on. I just say, if ever that was the moment to say, I'm going to remortgage my entire house and put it on that. That would have been your retirement forever. It was the certainty to end all certainties ever. But I think people are bit by bit working out there are certain ways that you can play against the All Blacks, and the laws of the game are doing that. So I don't think they're as impregnable as they once were. World Cup semi-final 2019 from Jim Smith. Well, absolutely. That's answered Ian McWilliams' thing about England ever beating the All Blacks. Which non-playing female commentator that you've worked with knows most about the game of rugby? Well, Jill Douglas knows a lot about it. She's married to Carl Hogg, an ex-Scotland international. She was, she's from Hawick, brought up in the game. She stood on the touchline at the age of 2 and watched the game. I mean, I don't think it matters if you're male or female. I think whatever sport it is, you can tell whether people know what they're talking about by the language they use and the way they use that language. And if they instinctively use phrases that you as a footballer, as a rugby player, as a whatever it might be, you say, God, you wouldn't say that in our game. You know, it's just, it may be what it might say in the guidebook, but you wouldn't use that phrase in our game. That is the giveaway. So, but so long as people understand it and talk in a natural way about it, you know, Sonia McLaughlin knows a lot about the game. You know, I think that certainly from my experience with the BBC, we've got some really good people who know the game and ask good questions as well, rather than just patsy questions. That's one of my favorite bête noirs at the moment. The people who don't ask questions that need to be asked. From a rugby fan, League and Union, do you feel that Rugby League will ever get the world stage that Union has? John Kilshaw, no, it won't, because you need, to have a world stage, you need lots of countries to be playing it. So the World Cup next year, there'll be some great games. I mean, there will be some absolutely great games, but you know who the last four are going to be now, and you probably know who the last two are going to be. So that's the problem there, but it doesn't stop it being a great sport. Has being politically correct completely taken over at the BBC from Nigel's iPad? Possibly. Yeah, there are issues there. There are issues there. Shall we say that? Claire Balding commentating on basketball. Are they netting their baskets? That's from Steve Pape. Are you a basketball person, Steve? Actually, that's one sport I've never commentated on. It's one sport. Yeah. Basketball and netball. I have are not a sports that I can bypass. To be honest, I just think any sport where you score the whole time is intrinsically less interesting than sports where you don't score all the time. That's why some of the best football matches ever end 0-0, because it's all box and cocks and this way and that and nip and tuck, and you never know what's going to happen. And at the end of it, it's all over and nobody scored, but it didn't matter because it was a great game. You know, you can't conceive of that in the basketball context of 111, 110. So
we talk about sports stars and the players, but let's talk about the referees. And one of our favourites, certainly, and a favourite of mine, Nigel Owen, 100th test weekend. What's your thoughts on his career and obviously your interactions with Nigel over the years?
Listen, I'm a fully paid up member of his fan club. And the hardest thing to be is to be like Nigel Owens if you're refereeing, because, and we had the guy from Bishop Stortford Rugby Club earlier on. If Nigel Owens is what rugby referees should be, then rugby referees further down the road, further down the pecking order rather, should be encouraged to be more like Nigel Owens, to let the game flow, to let the game happen, to be entertaining. Because if you come further down the pecking order, people are still paying 10, 15, 20 quid to go and watch a game, which a referee can ruin by adhering to the laws and blowing the whistle all the time, endlessly. So if Nigel Owens is what we aspire to from a referee, at lower levels, the assessors should be encouraging referees to embrace the game in that way and not be sticklers to the law. And so I think he's a fantastic role model from that point of view. The trouble is that a lot of people don't want to give referees free rein to interpret the game in that way and make it a better product, which I think is a really important point. Do you still follow Lincoln City? Yes, having a good year in League One this year. Do you think Leeds will stay in the Premier League? Yes, I do. Is the increased use of technology a good or a bad thing? Well, the problem is it's money. You know, with the best will in the world now. You go back to Frank Lampard's goal against Germany in the World Cup, you know, all those years ago, ruled out. I mean, the difference that would have made to football is indescribable. And yet, because we didn't have the technology, the wrong decision was made. It does slow the game down, and I do think the TMO in rugby is having too much say these days. They're either having too much to say, but also they're so slow. Just get on with it. When you've seen the first angle and it's patently obvious the bloke dropped the ball, get on with the game. We don't have to see another 9 angles before we confirm what we knew a minute and a half ago. And the other thing that the TMO, or the other thing that and this is true of football as well, everything else, You know, it's December the 2nd, is it? Whatever it is, today. No, what is the date today? 5th, 2nd, whatever that is. Whatever. Anyway, well, it doesn't matter what day it is. It's December, and it's starting to get cold. It was bloody cold today. I mean, God, it was horrible, and it was pouring with rain. You imagine if you had been at a match today, a football match or a rugby match today, in the weather like it was today, wherever you are in the country, and you'd been sitting there with your coat on and your muffler and everything else, and it had been an okay game, and then there's a dispute, and then you have to sit there for 2.5 minutes while we watch reruns of something that you realised 2.25 minutes ago that the ball hadn't gone over the line, or whatever it might be. You're going, please God, I am freezing my nuts off here. Can you just make a decision and get on with the game? So there are lots of factors in here that, you know, you have to understand what the constituency watching it at home or watching it at the venue is going. Please think about them. It's not just about you. A lot of TMO stuff there. So from Jeff Lavers, we roomed together in Galway on a Hayak tour with Simon. Hello, Jeff. And then spent a very nervy morning at Shannon Airport. Oh my God. Waiting for the fog to clear. Oh, Jeff, boy, do I remember that. That is a very, absolutely. And I don't know where you are, Jeff. And he is, and what amazed me about that was eventually the plane took off. And as we took off, there was a guy standing on a step ladder waving at us about 400 yards down the runway. And I just thought, God, only in Ireland. That was just totally bizarre. So yes, I do, wherever you are, Jeff. I remember that absolutely vividly. And an amazing night the night before, playing there in a long night
John,
into the morning.
John, and I really want to kind of cap off the night and pass on. And I want to say that from this year, been a very difficult year for the spectators, the real grassroots clubs, whether it be football, rugby, hockey.
Gone again.
Well, I'm not even sure what he was going to say.
I don't know. It was building up to a big question, but I don't quite know what it was.
I'm still going to be back.
Are you there, Marcus, or not?
Oh, it's just turned into a seance.
I'll keep talking, shall I?
He will go live out in the sticks.
Yeah.
Well, unless anybody wants to throw one more question at me, I will just say that was his best question yet, said Wim. Yes. Yeah. Actually, I was doing a charity quiz this afternoon where the chairman, it was a Zoom one, and the chairman had to do his speech at the start to welcome everybody on the quiz, except he muted himself. So he gave this spiel for 3 minutes. I was hosting the thing. And then I said, well, thank you very much, Bob, but nobody heard a word of that because you muted yourself. Could you do it all again? So he said, okay. So then he did it all again, but he'd muted himself again. So he had to do it. He had to do it 3 times, which was just fantastic. Do you still present the cup at the Fleet Air Arm Rugby competition? Played in a few, but well, yes, absolutely, Chris. It's named in memory of my dad, who was very involved with the Navy Rugby Union for many, many years. Will you be going with the Lancers Africa? No, from when? Because it clashes with Wimbledon. And I wouldn't be paid to go to the Lions tour. And I do, the BBC do throw a few beans my way to do Wimbledon. So that's that. But I did the Lions tour in 97 rather. And that was a great event. So which grounds do you like visiting in the Rugby Championship? Well, going to Jersey is always quite good fun, isn't it? Bedford's a really good rugby ground. I tell you if there's one rugby club that are, to me, the role models for all rugby clubs in this country, it's Doncaster Knights, who they spent a lot of money on players, but they've spent a lot of money on their stadium, and they've got a proper rugby ground there. They're a proper rugby club with lots of teams and all that sort of stuff, and they've grown. As the team has grown, the facilities and the ground has grown commensurately, and that's the important thing. There are too many clubs who just throw money at players and not as a consequence, and don't have facilities to match, and that is to the detriment of them, but it's massively to the detriment of the game as well. do you think technology is making the game of football more like American football? Well, yeah, it is a bit, but if you, I don't know, every time there's a goal that's ruled out because of offside by a nanosecond. Do you think that's right or do you think that's wrong? I don't know. We've got used. Why should football be exempt from a technology that other sports have embraced, like Hawkeye in tennis? Like in cricket. If you're a fanatical England cricket fan and England are playing Australia in an Ashes series, and you are absolutely convinced that an England batsman is not out LBW, and technology corroborates that, but the umpire gives him out. Where do you sit on that when your football team the next week has a goal ruled out? You can't have it both ways. I think sport as an entity, if you like, it either embraces technology totally and just says, hey, this is the world we live in, this is the world we're going into, and we have to do it, or you don't. And I think we're far too far down the road now. And the one thing I would also say is, I don't know if any of you watched the ATP tennis finals at the O2 2 weeks ago, where they had no line judges. So they just had Hawkeye. So it was quite literally, they had the two players. The court looked so crisp because there was nobody else cluttering up. It was just the two gladiators. It was the two boxers in the ring, basically. And every time the ball was close to a line, Hawkeye, which was a guy in a booth somewhere up there on a microphone, he called out or in. Now it was kind of spooky because it was really echoey as well. So the ball missed by that much, and you heard this voice go out, and you thought, where's that come from? And then after a while, you realise it was the guy up there. But actually, it made it look so much better, and you didn't have all the faff about Hawkeye challenges, which I kind of got a bit bored with now. It was quite fun when it started, but why don't we just have a decision and get on with it? So, so I kind of think we're in a technological age. Listen, what are we doing now? Without Zoom, we wouldn't be doing this. Technology is our master now, and sport has to. Accept. There we are. There's technology messing this up completely. So,
it's all right. It's all right. John has played me up all night, even with strong Wi-Fi. But there we are. I have got to say, you have been absolutely fantastic tonight, and to kick off, the online program for us. We're an organisation that normally gets around the table, has a drink, meets our buddies. We're all about fellowship and continued fellowship. And this is how we've had to live our life this year, like many organisations. And these nights are important because it's only our way to connect with each other. And I absolutely have got to say sincere thank you to you for warming us all up in our own homes tonight over the sport. But you know what? If you want to talk about personality of the year, then sir, that's definitely you when it comes to commentating in my book.
That's Marcus, that's okay. Can I just say, in response to somebody just said hello from South Lincolnshire, so wherever you are, hello. And about 3 people said, what's your favourite drink? I've got 2. I do like a good pint of SA down in South Wales, but a proper Bateman's in Lincolnshire is one of the great, it's just the best beer. It really is. I just love it. And whenever I go, I've still got some friends up there who I go up and see, not often enough actually, but I always make sure we go to a pub where they serve Bateman's because it's just fantastic. And if you're in a different part of the country where you've never had it, it's just great. And the Whitburn family say hello from Australia. So hello to you at 8 o'clock in the morning. Nice to see you all. And thank you to everybody for being, on board wherever you've been.